Hello everyone, welcome to Purpose Built with myself, Dial. I just want to say thank you to everyone who subscribed, thank you to everyone who has watched my previous videos, and today is a special day. We are launching my 3 books, which are all part of the Awakening series, and I could not think of a better person to have a conversation about the Awakening series and what the journey has been, but my friend Cikizwa Gaqa. So without further ado,
hi guys, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
I mean, we're here.
Alright, I'm alive. Let's start there.
We're both alive.
Yeah. So I think the first thing that I want us to talk about is talking awakening, right? What comes to mind when we're talking awakening and myself in the same sentence?
Wow.
Or maybe let's give it context, awakening and purpose.
Awakening and purpose, when I think of it and looking at the journey of the 3 books, it is realizing what it is you're here for on this earth. And fully immersing yourself in that purpose and not, how can I put it, not faltering to it, but you go for it with everything that you have.
Jeez. That's a lot.
It is. I mean, purpose is not something that you just, it's just purpose.
Yeah.
It's something that you work hard towards, and it's not something that you take for granted.
Yeah.
Because it's you.
Yeah.
It has your name on it.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying you go for it with everything that you have. Especially when you know,
soothing to my soul.
especially when you know that it's a God-given thing, and when it's God-given, no one can take it away.
Well, yeah. Thank you for that. It's a beautiful way to start the conversation. So let's talk about the crazy in me.
Well.
And I mean, no one has. We've been friends for like 20 years?
20 plus years.
Yeah, 20 plus years. Jeez,
Yeah.
it's been a long time. Since we were in grade 1.
Grade 1.
So that's like
27?
20. Oh Jesus, no.
It
It can't be
24. 24.
So we've been friends for 24 years. Loads of ups and downs. Distance, coming together, distance again. But you have been the one friend, well, not only you, I've got a number of friends, but you have been a core kind of strength for me and my soundboard in this entire journey. So what did you think when I said to you, God is saying I must write 3 books?
So, funny that you mentioned that, the 3 books, because whenever I read all the books, I could pinpoint where I was and be like, oh, I know that happened, or I was there when that happened. So it wasn't anything that I could say it's far-fetched.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah.
I knew it. And to see the hand of God in all of that, to have brought us to these 3 books being launched today is something so powerful to be a part of, first of all. And it's something
like just don't do that. Guys, I'm a crybaby. I'm a serious crybaby.
okay. So for you to have come to me and say, because what God has said to me that I'm going to be launching 3 books. For me, when you mention God, I already know there is no two ways about it. I'm not going to be the person that's going to say, oh yeah, okay. And so it wasn't a far-fetched thing to me, and so I embraced it at that moment that you told me.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, you're launching 3 books. Let's do it.
Yeah. Like, and that's you on everything that I say, but says about
yeah, because you come up with these things, as you say, you're crazy, and you come to me and you tell me these things, and I'm a crazy person too. I'm not about to be saying to you, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Who am I to say that to you?
But haven't you ever felt that, like, some of the things that I've said are a bit cuckoos?
No.
Honestly?
No.
Never?
No.
Okay. I thought I'm a bit cuckoos.
No. If you feel crazy, then I must be crazy too.
Okay, let's just say we're the crazy gang.
Crazy gang it is.
And so, okay, I tell you I'm going to write 3 books, and then we don't know what those 3 books are going to be, because we knew masterpieces, because I was already writing masterpieces.
We knew masterpieces was going to be part of it, but
everything
the other
else,
2 was like, okay,
yeah.
where's the other 2 going to come from?
And as I mentioned in the previous video, that I didn't understand where I'd get the content to write 3 books. Like, yeah, I know I am a storyteller, but I know, like, this story, I wouldn't have that much to say, you know, to comprise of 3 books. But I know that there were a few people that I told. I think probably I told about 3 people who were very close to where I was spiritually, and then I shared what God had said I must do, right? And honestly, it did feel like I was crazy, because I had never thought that I could do something like that. And as you know, I always thought that my first book was just going to be it.
And remember, you said the first book, My Pen Perfected, was just a letter to yourself.
Exactly.
You never realizing that,
No.
okay, I'm going to publish a book, and then be speaking to a whole lot of people, and then years later there's a 3-in-1 book launch.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay, so masterpieces. What are the highlights for you in masterpieces? By the way, guys, I think Cikizwa is probably the only person who's read all of my books from when they were on draft 0 up until the completion of each. So yeah. So let's talk masterpieces, the highlights for you.
Whoa. So I appreciated the fact that for masterpieces,
Yeah.
you put it into action. It wasn't a matter of, okay, I'm writing this book called Masterpieces. You had to go back yourself so that you actually mastered those pieces.
Yeah.
I remember you took some time off and you went back home. You had just printed out masterpieces. And in that, it was a journey for you, and you're like, okay, this is really me being mastered. This is me mastering my pieces. And you also acknowledge that in the book, that it is a process.
Yeah.
It's not something you say, okay, you acknowledge, okay, I'm mastering my pieces, I'm working on things about myself and dealing with a whole lot of things. And I appreciate that about an author like you. When reading masterpieces, right? So then for me, in any book that I read, I try to find the bits that align with me, the bits that I can identify with.
Yeah.
And I identified with what you were saying, that you need to find out where it is it stems from, where everything, because it all stems from somewhere.
Yeah.
If you don't know where it stems from, then you're not going to be able to resolve it.
True.
And you spoke about
the chances of something repeating itself in your life, or like having a pattern,
yes,
is because you don't know what the root cause of something is.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So in a video that I watched, someone said that life has a way of showing you the same lesson. And because you didn't learn it the first time, or you didn't pick it up, it will come again.
True.
So Masterpieces realigned that and reaffirmed that we need to go back. And in going back, don't half do it.
Yeah.
Do it fully. And first of all, the work will not necessarily be just you. It will involve other people as well. And in involving other people, you need to, as yourself, and I'm talking about me, as yourself, not really put yourself in their shoes, but you find a way of seeing their perspective, and then you see your perspective. And then you will realize that, okay, that was wrong of that person, that was wrong with me, because it cannot be something that's one-sided.
Yeah.
And in that process, you find a way of getting to the process of forgiving. Understandably, you will not forget. It's difficult for us to have an infant's memory.
Lord Jesus.
But you get there.
Yeah.
So it really is mastering your pieces and being at peace.
So one of the things that I think the reason why the books are part of a series called Awakening is because my awakening came from the fact that I realized that there were things that I needed to go back to understand certain behaviors, to understand patterns of things reoccurring in my life, and to also just understand what my path was going to be going forward, beyond just being the person who had grown up being an isolated child, and then realizing that the isolation came from the fact that I was sexually abused and raped, and my mom being an alcoholic, and the family feuds that then occurred, the push and pull between my grandmother and my mother, and the disruption that was just within my childhood. There were things that I needed to go back to go master, so that I could go back to being restored in who I was born to be. Because pain does that. It taints your vision, it taints where you're going, and I love the fact that you mentioned the forgiveness thing, because it was forgiveness of self, it was forgiveness of others, and it was not just a one-stop shop. It's been a process and continues being a process. Okay, so then let's flow to Love Unscripted. There's a lot to say about Masterpieces.
There's a lot.
So much to say. And what I'll do, as I mentioned, guys, before, that I will have a few episodes on each book, so that I break down some of the concepts that I go through in the books. So let's just flow into Love Unscripted. Your key highlights.
So let me read it.
Gosh.
So as a person, because you know how I aligned your books was that I had already been on a journey where I am doing the work within myself.
Yeah.
So whenever I buy books or self-help books, it always has to be something that I can align with myself, or it can be purely for enjoyment. But most of the books that I have read come from that. So there's a question that she has in chapter 6 about expectations. and because I've also had these conversations with other friends of mine, in terms of the expectations that we have of other people, forgetting us and what we have to offer. And this is the question that had come about in a conversation I had, and then it came back through this book, and it says, you are saying, ask yourself this simple question: am I that which I desire in another person? We should not expect from another person what you are not willing to give. You know? So I had been talking to a couple of friends in saying that the generational man is not ready for the generational woman. and the generational woman is not ready for the generational man.
Yeah.
Well, some of them are not ready.
Yeah.
And in that, they're not asking that question. Because let's face it, a lot of people have expectations, and then when it comes to that question of, so what are your expectations in this relationship, if you're starting a relationship? And so, and also, it's not really just romantic relationships. You also have a relationship with yourself. So what expectations do you have of yourself? At work, what expectations do you have? Your manager has expectations about you, your work, etc. Clients and so forth. It's not just boxed in a relationship.
But in this context,
it's within relationships.
What do you call these relationships?
Situationships.
Not situationships, right? It's within romantic relationships.
So that question, and it just jumped out at me because you seldomly ask that of yourself. The immediate thing is, what is the other person willing to give me, instead of what am I bringing to the relationship?
And I feel like that is probably the one thing that, if we were to be honest about, within society, but especially as women, we would find that there's just so much that we need to unlearn when it comes to what a relationship is supposed to be and what you ought to give or receive within a relationship. And I say that because had I not gone through the process of going back to confronting the skeletons of my past as masterpieces was written, I would have never understood the role I wanted to play within a relationship context, or what it is that I wanted my relationships to look like.
Exactly.
Because everything had been clouded by where I come from. And so I found myself, especially in relationships, repeating scenarios or patterns that I found that people who had raised me had kind of had, you know. And in the book, obviously, I speak about my celibacy journey and then deciding that, I need time out. And what that unlocked for me was a perspective of looking at myself from a selfless space, which then made it easy for me to ask myself, if I were me, would I want to date me? And would I have the expectations that I have on other people?
I think you asked that question in the book too.
Like, would I want to date me? And that's a hard question to ask yourself.
Yes, because you're being honest with yourself, and some of it is going to be a hard and a harsh truth to swallow.
Very true.
The answers or the response that you come up with is like not entirely what you expect, but it comes from a certain place, and that's when you're like, okay, I need to rethink this.
Yeah, so I think, and that's why someone asked me why the books are not separate and why they come as a package. And I said they flow into each other, because for anyone to understand what it meant for me to unscript what I know about love and to script something that was new, an understanding or perspective that was new, you need to understand the kind of skeletons that I had in the past that I had, and what, in the context of relationships, I had grown up believing about love, about sex, about relationships, you know. And so, the one thing that I'm always open about, for example, as you would know, because you are everywhere that I'm at, is that sex for me was a way of buying love. I thought for me to prove to a man that I love him, then that's the only way for me. So there was no value beyond just sleeping with someone, because that's what I knew love to to be. And that was not only based on watching people have relationships within the family context, within society, but it was also based on the fact that the only understanding of belonging that I knew came from the fact that sex was used in my childhood.
Yes,
to
from the very beginning.
Exactly. And so for me it was, and I didn't know that up until I started the confrontation of my past. And that's why the books come as a whole, because for you to understand the root, you must understand, for you to understand why I speak about love and relationships, you need to understand the past, which is masterpieces. Gosh, I feel like we could like spend so much more time.
An entire hour talking and unpacking all of this.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add about that before we swiftly move on to
what I love about it is that you quoted my favorite scripture, and this was the first scripture that described love to me. And it never left me. That I think it's 2 Corinthians chapter 13. When you quote that, well, for me it's the second definition of love, but when it comes to the relation that you have with another person, it can be your brother, your sister, your mother, your boyfriend, whoever, that is what it is.
I definitely, like, I feel like I could dwell on so much on this book, because there's also the part of where I speak about self-love and marrying yourself. And this is why I have a ring, bazalwane. Because
there's no ring here.
Because
I do love myself though. Please.
Because for me, the entire journey was a journey of getting back to myself, and for me loving myself wholeheartedly to a point where I would choose myself in sickness or in health, you know, for better or for poorer. I would love myself unconditionally, irrespective of someone else doing it or not. And I think that is one thing that I would want everyone to walk away with when it comes to this book. To know that loving God does not mean you let go of yourself.
True.
In fact, loving God is loving yourself unconditionally, accepting yourself unconditionally. Yeah, if you get that, I'd be a happy chappy. Let's move on to
You see what I'm doing?
Guys, I have tissues here, because let me just prepare myself.
So why I'm doing this is what Madam did with this one. It was a matter of don't. So
I'm already crying.
The third installment of the series is Homeless, the Cost of Obedience. Now this one, it really speaks into the journey, and it really does round up the entire series. And
what stands out for you?
It is the chapter 7, obedience to self. So when you get to this point of you are obedient to yourself, it is, and that's why I'm saying that this third installment of the series rounds everything up, because you have mastered your pieces. You know love in a scripted way and in an unscripted way. And now you are at an obedient stance in your life. Not an easy thing to do. Not an easy thing to do. And it's a journey of itself, of its own, and you just have to, that's when you are leaning more on God and your faith, and there's just nothing else that can get you through. Because also the obedience to self, it was your purpose. It was not only your faith, your relationship with God, it's more than that. It goes deeper than that. And I like this part. Circumstances constantly remind us about the places we have been hurt. This makes us look at the parts of our lives that aren't perfect and feel that we were unworthy. We therefore convince ourselves that there is no way God would want to use us in any case. But it is disgrace to be living in the kingdom of a God who is the creator of the universe and to live below our lineage. I have lived like that for too long. Never again. That is the statement when you realize okay, she's decided, I'm going for it. I am not going to put myself second. And that's why it's obedience to self. Because you're adhering to, this is what God has said about me, and I'm going. At that point when you say, I have lived like that for too long, never again.
Whoa. I had promised myself I wasn't gonna cry. Yeah, this book was so difficult to write.
I know, you held on to it for so long. I mean, the emails that came, and I'm like, okay, I'm done. And disclaimer, she sent this manuscript to me in October last year. And she opened my email this year, January. That's how much she was holding on to it.
Yeah.
And I understand why.
Guys, purpose inner costs, and they are not nice. They are worth it, but they are not nice. The last thing that I would have expected to happen after accepting my calling and saying, okay, God, I'm going to do it your way, was to find myself at a point, and I think probably that's where God wanted me, to forget about everything that I thought I had achieved and to solely be Usmamkele, bare, without any attachments. And I'm saying this because when I got to the point where I was homeless, a number of people think that I was homeless prior to starting the entire journey, right? And I couldn't recognize myself. And I kid you not, there was a part where I was just like, I had even forgotten that I had degrees. Like, everything just seemed to not matter or be important anymore. And I wondered why God, because in my mind, it felt like God had reduced me. Like, this cousin dipalele, ne? But I think when I look at the inverse and what God was trying to do in me was to create in me an image of myself that reflected who He is without the materialistic things,
yes,
right? And without the degrees which have not been the ones to give me the wisdom that I have. Yes, I'm able to articulate myself well, but I don't think that, it's solely because I'm an educated person. Because there's so many people who are educated, who aren't educated, but do amazing things. So, I think at that point where I felt I had hit rock bottom and had lost everything that I thought I was. At a point where I felt things were starting to go my way and lifting, Gandhi, I was gonna go the opposite direction. And I then learned though that that is exactly where God wanted me to be. And then everything that I had defined myself as was below the standards that He had set for me.
Always.
And so that's why that part that you read got to me, because I spent years defining myself with things that I had no business defining myself with, but I didn't know. I didn't know that there was more to life than just the life that we know it to be.
Yeah.
Especially when you're raised to get an education, pass, get your degree, work, retire, or get married somewhere there.
Yeah, it happens. That's the normal thing you have.
Get married.
Like, pass matric, go to university, get your degree, work, buy a house, buy a car, get married, have kids. That's it. But
then you die.
It doesn't happen that way.
And so, I mean, that had always been the way that I thought my life was going to pan out. And I had already detached myself from the concept of getting married at this particular age. That I had worked through. But I think in terms of career and materialistic achievements, I felt you know, driving my Merc now. And God literally stripped all of that mentality away from me through being homeless and through
those material things being taken away, and then you realize, actually, and literally, I think you posted at some point, you need to be able to look at yourself in the mirror, or when you are with yourself, ask yourself, who are you without those things?
Without the things.
And I think that's when you lived it, and you're like,
listen, when I had do you remember the maroon shoes that I had that were like push-ins?
Yes.
So I had those shoes and I had All-Stars. And most of my clothes were in my boot. And it's funny now. It wasn't funny.
It wasn't funny back then.
But, and imagine like they're in a boot and the car, like the bank wanted the car.
So imagine if the bank came, took the car, the clothes are also gone.
Oh, guys. But I think those moments built so much resilience in me. And they built the best version of me. Something I would never want to give away. And so as hard as it was, I'm grateful for it.
Exactly.
But I'm also grateful that I had people like you and so many others who I mentioned in the book who provided for me. Some provided comfort, some provided their homes as shelter, some provided monetarily, and some provided faith and wisdom during that time, because I was also very suicidal at some point during my homelessness, because I was just like, what do I balalo? Utedwa this. What a journey it's been. Right?
Yeah. A journey worth everything.
Right.
because in the end you're able to look back and you see the hand of God that worked everything out for your good, because you knew that it's all happening for my good, but in your reluctance,
yeah, but
you
you
soldiered on.
Such things.
You soldiered on. And that's why you have that chapter that says obedience to self.
So if we were to, in 5 words for each book, to summarize each book in 5 words.
Just 5 for all 3.
I think let's do 5 for all 3. What would you say? So let's do 6, 2 each.
Okay. So which one are we starting with?
Let's start with masterpieces.
Masterpieces? It speaks for itself. Mastered pieces.
Okay.
It really does.
Okay, cool. I agree with you.
Love unscripted. It's 3 words.
3.
It's 3.
Okay.
You are worthy.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's nice. Wow. You're worthy.
Homeless, cost of my obedience. I don't know why this one is a hard one to...
Yeah, I said it.
It has that thing. Kingdom Keep.
Wow.
Yeah. Because in your walk of obedience, you are walking towards what is in the kingdom of God and what God bestowed upon your life. So yeah.
Thank you very much for having this conversation. It was so heartwarming.
It's awesome. Really, really, really honored to have been part of the conversation and part of the journey. It's always beautiful to see something from inception. And also I always differentiate between, okay, inception we see it, and then also on the outside you also get to see it, so you get the internal and external part of it. So
you've been part of it all.
And it all comes together. I cannot put into words how that just sums it up in terms of this is what God had planned and entailed to happen. No other way.
So guys, we are about to celebrate this milestone, and yeah, this is an exciting moment. Yay!
Congratulations on the launch of your 3-series book, Awakening series, Vuka Ubuye. Thank you for coming back.
She said it all. I am the comeback kid. Goodbye. Thank you for watching, guys. Thank you. I love you. Bye.